Hey everyone, this is just a quick note that Sarah wanted me to hop on and let you all know. Sarah's mom was not her abuser. So her father was an alcoholic and he was her main abuser when he was alive. Sarah and her mom have had an enmeshed relationship since she was young that caused her mother to be a trauma trigger for her. So she just wanted me to come on and clarify that just so you can know who is who and didn't, think that somebody was her abuser when in fact they were not. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Light After Trauma podcast. I am your host, Alyssa Scolari, and we have a guest episode today. It is so rare that we have guests on the podcast these days, but there is a special person who I met just like Jennifer Burns, which Jennifer, if you haven't listened to older episodes, Jennifer is the woman who we talked about crystals with and how crystals have been used and have helped her with her trauma recovery. I met Jennifer just because she was a podcast listener and we connected and we started talking about a topic that we were really passionate about. And a similar thing has happened with today's guest. Her name is Sarah Tatarski. And I met Sarah basically through the podcast. She was a listener of the podcast, reached out, and we started talking via Instagram. Now, Sarah is an artist, an aspiring entrepreneur, a cat mom, and a mental health missionary. She recently graduated from college in May of 2021 and has been on a mission since then to work through her core wounds from childhood and early adult life. After 4 years of only doing CBT and feeling ready to be deeply challenged, she tried more intensive therapeutic approaches. These include trauma-focused treatment centers, family therapy, EMDR, ketamine for major depressive disorder, and the use of a cranial electrotherapy stimulation device called alpha-Stim. Sarah recently started a mental health focused Instagram called Vulnerable and Not Afraid to share her recovery from trauma and educate people on other therapeutic options that have personally helped her. Now, we are talking about a really important topic today, and I know I say that shit every week. So, forgive my redundancy, but you know how I love all things mental health. But I think that this is particularly important because for the last 2 years on this podcast, we have spoken about therapy and treatment pretty much from like a standard outpatient setting. So, how to process things when you're going to therapy once a week or twice a week in your standard outpatient setting. And, that isn't always enough. And there certainly have been many times where it wasn't enough for me. And I know that there are many people out there that hasn't been enough for either, including Sarah. So we are talking about different treatment options for when you find yourself in a place where therapy once a week or twice a week is just not enough. So with that said, I will stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. I know we were actually supposed to record like a week ago, and then I had COVID and lost my voice and sounded like not even remotely myself. So thank you for rescheduling and bearing with me. Let's start out by me asking you, tell me what even makes you passionate about this? Like, if you're comfortable, can you tell me about a little bit of your own experiences?
Yeah. In regards to seeking mental health treatment or my trauma or all of it, what particularly?
Yeah, I think, you have a lot of experience and knowledge on like alternative forms of treatment. And so I guess what my question would be is like, Did you get to a certain point in your life where you were like, hey, like just going to therapy once a week isn't enough for me? Like, how did you know what was going on in your life? Like things like that.
Yeah, so I've had a couple different, I guess you could say, breaking points in my life. The first one was March 2019, and I had to take a medical withdrawal from school, but I instantly felt better not being in school. The stressors were gone. I said, oh, okay, cool. Like I can manage this. And, I trudged along. December 2020 came. I had this traumatic memory that I didn't remember resurface. I was living back at home with my mom and I was just spiraling like crazy. And that's when the first time my therapist said, Sarah, you need to go to this trauma center. And I said, we'll see. I told her the memory finally, and then I felt better again. And so I just trudged along, finished school. And then I just completely fell apart because post-grad depression is real. I don't think people talk about it enough. They're like, it's so fun. Oh my gosh, congrats. And I said, I'm miserable and I have no path anymore. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And a lot of my friends went through this too, especially us who graduated in 2020 and 2021. We were so burnt out from COVID and the huge changes we had to go through. So for me, I said, oh, I'm going to take a break. And that break turned into me spiraling constantly. And it just got to a point in end of June where I was not really eating. I wasn't really sleeping. That same memory came nagging at my brain. And my therapist said, you need to forego your income and just go to a trauma center. And I said, okay.
That's a hard thing to hear. Like, that's a really hard thing to hear.
Yeah, it just got to the breaking point then. And I had moved back home again in May 2021 with my mom, which didn't realize back then, but she was a huge trigger. And I didn't quite grasp why she was until later, after all these therapies I've done. But I was just absolutely miserable. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm finally going to do this. I have the ability to not work. I have really good insurance. I'm going to take advantage of this. And so that was the line where I'm just miserable every day of my life to the point where I don't know if I can live. So that was my breaking point in June 2021.
So you're saying like you were at that point where you were like, I just don't even know if I want to be alive anymore. Like my safety might be on the line.
Yeah. I've thankfully never struggled with SI, suicidal ideation, much, but it was getting to that point where I just felt like, I don't know, can I go forward in life? And that's what motivated me to get different help and more intense help.
Okay. So I really appreciate that you said that, because I think it's very important to highlight that this country sort of makes it seem like in order, I guess we can just also start out by saying that the system for higher levels of care isn't the greatest. It's not the greatest. And so on one hand, we sort of like shame people from talking about their suicidal thoughts for fear of them getting like locked up. But then on the other hand, when people have suicidal thoughts, they are often told when they go to a hospital and they want treatment, they're often told, well, you actually have to make an attempt in order to be hospitalized, or in order to not even just be hospitalized, but in order to like eventually get to a treatment center. So I think it's really important that you said, you know what, like I'm not necessarily suicidal, right? I'm not necessarily a danger to myself, but I'm not okay with the quality of life that I currently have. And therefore I'm seeking alternative forms of treatment, because you don't have to get to a point where your life is on the line to decide to seek different forms of treatment. I love that you said that.
Yeah, I didn't want to get to that point. And it was teetering between that. I've met friends at my trauma centers who have attempted, were attempting, got transferred from intensive care to, where I was. And yeah, I don't think it's acknowledged enough that you don't have to be either attempt or actively planning to seek help, because I didn't want to get to that point. I never want to. And I hopefully never will.
You had mentioned like a little while ago that you realized after different types of treatment that your mom was a trigger for you. And one of the questions I have is, was it difficult for you to go to treatment while living? Because you had lived with your mom while doing some of this treatment. Was it difficult to live with somebody who is a trigger while going to a treatment? Because I think a lot of people can probably relate to that.
Yeah, it was a whole nother challenge. I'm in my trauma for, let's see, the first trauma center I went to, I was there from 9 to 4 p.m. I did therapy 3 times a week individually. We had groups all day, trauma groups 4 times a week, and relapse prevention, which was incredible, which, by the way, I had no idea what relapse prevention was. And I said, I don't do drugs. So I just kind of laughed it off until I got there and said, oh, I have a lot of toxic behaviors that are not related to alcohol or, any kinds of other drugs. So life-changing.
Yes.
But just doing that all day and having the realizations that I was having. And then I come home. And by the way, I didn't mention this. I'm in my childhood house where I experienced my trauma. And that is where I'm living right now.
Oh my. Okay.
That's a whole nother level of, I'm living with a trigger. I'm living in a trigger. And I came home every day and I'm like, I'm like running around like a chicken with its head cut off. I'm freaking out. I can't ground myself. I can't focus on my treatment. And the only relief I got was when I stayed with my friend for a whole week. And I was like, I can come back. And I just lay in bed. I'm like, I'm so happy and relaxed. But it was extremely challenging. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend anyone doing what I did. I mean, living with your trigger and living in the house you were abused. I recommend trauma treatment. Absolutely. Of course, I wouldn't be on here otherwise recommending it. But it made the process that much harder because there was a point I told my therapist, I said, I just want to be a prostitute right now and like move out of my house. And he said, Sarah, no. And I'm like, but that's how I feel. And he said, I'm not going to act on it, but that's how overwhelmed I am right now. It's like, I will do anything to get out of my house. Of course, I never acted on it, but that's
right, to the point where
the thoughts
you're considering, you're considering like prostitution or sex work to like get out. You're like, I will do whatever I have to get out of this place.
Which is, there's nothing wrong with sex work. It's just not I have too much trauma to engage in that field. Sex workers, y'all do whatever you want. But yeah, that's just to the point. I was so vulnerable that's what I was just willing to do. And that's not a healthy situation to be in.
I mean, right, exactly. It would be ideal, right? Again, like you said, there's no issue with sex workers. It's feeling like you're trapped and you're backed into a corner to the point where your only way out is considering an option that would be re-traumatizing for you. Like that's when all the alarm bells are sounding. You're like, okay, I need to do something here.
Exactly. Yeah, it was very intense.
So then can you talk a little bit about, I guess, let's go in specifically, like, where should we start? What type of treatment did you start with? Because I know you've done a couple different things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are a lot of things I've done the past year. So I'll just briefly summarize. And then if you want to ask more specific questions, we can go from there. But the first thing that I did was in July 2021, I went to a partial hospitalization program at a trauma center here in New Orleans called River Oaks. Recommended fully. So I wasn't living there. I was there from 9 to 4, like I had mentioned. You're just there during the day. You don't live in the hospital. It's kind of scary inside. I would not wanting to stay there. I did not want to stay there, but
scary, like hospital setting type, like?
Yes, it was cold and there were not a lot of lights and you went outside, or not a lot of windows, and you went outside for like 20 minutes a day. It was kind of like jail. So
yes, so many partial hospitalizations, like programs are like that. Like I've been to one myself and it feels like jail. And I'm like, why aren't these a little bit happier? Like you're trying to help people with their mental health. Why do we feel like we're locked up?
Exactly. So I did that. And then once I was done with that program, I started seeing a therapist for EMDR. And then in December 2021, I went to a residential treatment program called Inova Grace in San Antonio, Texas. And I was doing a lot of EMDR there. I used the VAT bed. I used the alpha-Stim, which I'm wearing right now, like I mentioned earlier. And after that, continued to do EMDR. That's what I'm doing with my therapist right now. I started ketamine for major depressive disorder. And now I'm using the alpha-Stim again. And forgot to mention on top of that, the past however many months it's been since August 2021, so like 9 months, I've been in family therapy. So I'm doing a ton of different therapies. And also I recently joined Adult Children of Alcoholics group and Dysfunctional families. So I've been going to that support group about every 2 weeks to every week. So if you want me to expand on all of that, that's a lot of different treatments that I just mentioned. So happy to talk about any of it in more detail.
Yes, I have questions. I think the first question is, how did you end up getting involved in, especially in a post-COVID world, in adult children of alcoholics support group? Because I think that there are many people out there who are listening who would be very interested in that.
Yeah, so there are always meetings everywhere in the country and world at all times. And a lot of them are on Zoom now too, which is great. So you can just hop on Zoom at any time. And for me, I prefer in-person group. So I go to the one at the church near my house at 5 p.m. on Sundays. And the way to get involved is to just go to their website, look up Adult Children of Alcoholics / Dysfunctional Families. And if you want to go to in-person meeting, you can just look up your town and see where it is. And if you don't want to go in person, you can join literally any group. Like from what I've seen online, probably at least half of them are hybrid. So you can go in person if you want. You can go on Zoom if you want. But when they read the laundry list, I don't know if you've ever read that. It's the 14 traits that you can have as an adult with having a dysfunctional family or an alcoholic. And I fit all 14 traits. So that's when I knew I belonged.
Oh, I don't think that I've ever read that before, but I bet it would be very jarring for me.
You will be surprised. And when I say all 14 traits, I don't mean I have those now. I mean, at some point in my life, I've had all 14 of them. So even if you have one, I'm pretty sure they're like, if you have one of these traits, you are welcome here.
Wow. Okay. And for the listeners out there, I will link that in the show notes, the website that you can go and you can check it out, because I think it's very important. And I know that a lot of you can relate. So, okay, cool. So thank you for that. So now question about, so in terms of EMDR, right? So I'm going through EMDR right now. And I've been, open about my experiences, both on my Instagram, and I've shared a little bit on the podcast. And we've also had people come on and talk about EMDR. I guess the main question I have for you about EMDR, because for those of you out there who don't know what it is, I talk about it in depth with a licensed clinical social worker. Her name is Melissa Parks on the podcast, and you can feel free to go and check that out. It is a really fantastic treatment for trauma that focuses on rewiring your nervous system, like your brain. So for EMDR, did you find that was like particularly helpful for you?
It's definitely helped. It's not perfect. Of course, no treatment is perfect, but I've honestly been only able to work on and am working on 2 memories. But the thing about these specific memories I'm working on is that they hold a key to other things that I can't remember. And that's why my therapist says, we're going to keep working on these 2. And I'm like, no, I want to be done with them. But it's definitely helped me to calm down in regards to my body not being as reactive. And I've noticed that the first memory that really resurfaced after about 8 years and that drove me to get the help that I needed, my reaction to it has gone down a lot. My bodily reaction, I used to throw up. I used to not eat. And now it will come up and I'll be like, okay, deep breath. It's okay. you're safe. Like that's not happening right now. I've talked about it many times. I've opened up to friends. I've opened up to multiple therapists. And so I'm able to calm myself down. On the past, I would just flying around, like running around my house. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm scared, all this stuff. So it significantly reduced my reactions. And I don't want people to think that it gets rid of the memory. I think some people are like, I want to get rid of my memories. And I'm like, that's not how it works. But it reduces your bodily reaction to it. And I definitely notice, like I said, I'm not violently reacting like I used to in the past. So I found relief with it. My brain also likes to block me thinking about these two particular memories because they're some of the most intense memories I have. But as I continue to work on it, I'm able to feel less reactive and process it with my therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I think that that's ultimately like, right. There's no such thing as a perfect treatment, but EMDR, I think, is supposed to be beneficial at just like relaxing your nervous system, right? So that like hypervigilance isn't there as much. All right. So can you talk about alpha-Stim? And then there was one other, what did you say in addition to alpha-Stim?
Well, I've been doing ketamine for major depressive disorder. So there's that in addition to the alpha-Stim, family therapy, and then my trauma centers and EMDR, which is all like, they're all interconnected anyway.
Right. Right. Can you talk about alpha-Stim? Because I think that's a very new term. I'm not even familiar with alpha-Stim.
I am shocked at, I actually spoke with a psychiatrist a couple weeks ago. He monitors me when I'm doing ketamine. And I told him about it. He said, I've never heard of that. And I'm like, ooh, this is alarming. I'll go into details about it, but I'll give you a little bit of a history because I was wondering, why is this not talked about every single day? Why is this not open on the market? And I'll tell you this. So I read about the history of alpha-Stim. Yes, I'm a nerd. I read the little pamphlet that came with it. But so the way that it works is it uses biophysics. And biophysics used to be taught in medical school up until the 20th century. And then the chemistry took over and they stopped teaching biophysics. Of course, we know that pharmaceutical industry has a huge power over everything in this country. And so I found that interesting that they used to teach biophysics, but now they don't. And that's probably why it's not really mainstream, as you would want to call it. But I'll just read you exactly what they say from the website because I don't want to give any misinformation to y'all. So the way that it works is it's cranial electrotherapy stimulation, and it uses small electrical currents to stimulate certain brain regions. And these currents mimic the electrical activity naturally occurring in the brain, which in turn regulates the electrical part of the brain's electrochemical signals. And this is how it helps you to get peace of calm. It basically regulates you without any drugs, just pure biophysics, which our body is just a huge electrical network. And that's how they use the power of our body to heal with the alpha-Stim. And you have to use it consistently, like every day over, months to really get the full benefits. But you feel benefits within even like a day. Because I hadn't used it in 3 months since I was at my last trauma center, and I got it in the mail about 2 weeks ago. I put it on my ears, and after I was like, I feel so much better already. And I forgot how magical this thing is. So
wow,
it has been, It's been incredible. I'm sleeping better. I've had one migraine the past 11 days. I usually get them every single day of my life. So I'm not making the stuff up. Whenever I would never tell anybody to go buy a medical device if it didn't work. But I just feel so much better. I feel more rested. Because I have chronic pain due to my trauma, and I just feel a lot more content with life the past 2 weeks, which is hard for me to say usually.
I mean, yeah, that's incredible. So when you say like, I have this and I put it on my ears, like, what is it? Are they just like little like sensory like clips you put on your ears and you have like a little
Yeah,
machine around your neck?
it's literally this small. Oh, nobody can
Oh,
see it, but it's about the size of like a palm or like a hand, depending on how big your hands
yeah.
are. I know I'm sort of small, so my hands are a little small, but it's about the size of my hand. And the way that it works is that you put a solution on your ears, and then you clip the electrodes onto your ear, and it just sends little electrical signals to your ear. And so you feel this like very mild little prick to your ear, but it doesn't hurt. And that's it. You use it at your house. You can use it on an airplane. You can use it wherever you want to use it. It's just like the size, even smaller than an iPhone. So it's so easy to carry around if you need it to use it anywhere.
And is there like, is it something that like insurance covers, or do people just buy it out of pocket? Do they have to go through like a therapist or a treatment center or anything like that?
So from what I know, the only insurance that covers it is TRICARE through the military, and only if you're active duty will they pay for it in full, which is
Okay.
annoying. So without insurance, it costs $840. And while it sounds like a lot, the amount of money I've spent going to doctors asking, what is wrong with me? Why am I in so much pain? The amount of days I've missed work, the amount of days I've missed out on life, the $840 is beyond worth it.
Yes.
And some insurances may cover it. I don't have that answer. My insurance is really good. And they said no. They outright said, we're not even going to give you money back. And I said, that's really frustrating. And $840 is a lot for people. It's a lot for me. But I got to a point where I was just breaking down. And I was like, I can't do this. I cannot live like this every day of my life. And so I took the plunge. I ordered it. I use it twice a day. And I feel so much better. I can't even emphasize. I wish I could show data to show how much less pain I'm in. But like I said, they have a 9 out of 10 success rate. And they've been studying this for over 40 years. So this isn't something that's new to the market. It's not, oh, in 2020, we invented this device. It's 40 plus years of research.
Yeah. And it's infuriating because it's also one of those things where it's like, like you said earlier, right? Why is this not talked about more? And it's like, well, because it's so successful. And when it's so successful, who suffers? Big pharma, because people require less and less treatment and medication. And therefore, like, right, like if you heal, you aren't going to be paying as much money on other forms of treatment like meds. And, like it's no surprise that it's one of those things that's kept hush hush.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, well, I'm not going to go too much on the tangent because then we would talk for hours, but the big pharma is based on a subscription model. They want you to be sick for your entire life. Why would they not want you to be? They want you to suffer. So they make money. And that's why I think, insurances aren't going to cover it because they are very much tied into big pharma, of course. And so I tell everybody, since I got it the past 2 weeks, anyone that I meet or who's in my life, I'm like, pay the $840 if you can. It is worth every dime. And I would never tell anybody to buy something if I really didn't believe it, because that's not like $100. That's $840. But
yes,
like I said, I mean, I'm sure the amount of us who've been through trauma, or even if you haven't been through significant amount of trauma, you probably have some amount of pain from being on your computer all day. So I just recommend it to anybody if you're able to afford it or, save up to get it. It's really been incredible. And I'm so lucky that my trauma center I went to in December to February had access to the alpha-Stim for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I will also link the website to the alpha-Stim device on the show notes, so you can check that out. And then so let's talk about ketamine, because this is one that I am more familiar with, but I have not spoken with anybody who has gone through it. So can you talk about like what it is and what your experience is with it?
Yeah, so I will say there are different kinds of ketamine treatment. There's the nasal spray, which I do, there's the shot, and there's also IV. And I don't know which form is the most intense, but I know that the IV one is you get a very strong high and it's very strong. With Spravato, which is the ketamine that I do 2 nasal sprays, 1 in each nose. And you can go up to 3 sprays or 3 doses. Sorry, I don't know how many sprays it is, but I do the 2. Some people do 3 doses. I'm very sensitive to drugs in general. So I was like, let's go with the lower one. I don't want to get too high. I would like to, see how I feel first.
Yeah.
So I started looking into doing ketamine last fall, and my insurance rejected me. I don't know how. I don't qualify for it. I had just spent 2 months at a trauma center. I don't know how they, apparently they didn't want to cover it. I struggle with major depressive disorder. So I felt really upset. And then so kindly, the clinic I went to called me and they said, that the Johnson & Johnson Patient Assistance Foundation could help cover you if you qualify. If you don't make enough money or if you don't, there's some income bracket level that I'm not 100% sure what it is. And if your insurance denies you, they could consider covering you for up to a year and then renew you. And so I applied. I'll be honest, I had been making $0. I just come out of a trauma center. So I definitely knew I would qualify because 1, my insurance rejected me, and 2, my income was at 0 at that point.
Right.
And they sent me in a card, and for a full year, they will cover it. And all I have to pay is, I think, a $25 copay each time, because out of pocket, it's like $250. So I'm extremely lucky that the J&J Patient Assistance Foundation was covering me. And yeah, I started going in March 2022. It's a big commitment. I will admit that. I don't know what it's like for, like I said, the IV or the shot, but with Spravato, you have to go twice a week for a month. And you can't drive yourself there or back because you're too high. And then the next month, you only go once a week. And then after that is maintenance if you choose. So
wow.
During the it's a big commitment. During the process, you're just laying in a room for 2 hours by yourself. At least that's how my clinic does it. So I'm just laying there and I'm like high as heck. And I'm just laying there. And it's a really nice time to almost meditate or just reflect for 2 hours. I literally can't do anything. I'm too high. I can barely look at my phone. And it's been nice to have that reflection time. While I'm not exactly sure exactly if it's benefiting me, because it's hard, right? I had just come from a trauma center. I'm in therapy. I'm in family therapy. I have so many variables in my life that are helping me to heal that I can't exactly say, is ketamine helping me? Because there's just too many factors in my life right now that are helping me feel better. But that forced relaxation has been a challenge for me because I struggle with relaxing and forcing myself to just exist in the world and just be. So
right, as do many trauma survivors. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's been one of the most healing aspects of ketamine, is just being. I even cried during one session. I was like, what are these emotions that are just suddenly coming up? I was like, this is healthy.
What is this? Yeah.
So it's supposed to help people who struggle a lot with SI, again, suicidal ideation for people who don't know the shorthand. But I have other friends who've done ketamine in different forms, and they said it has changed their life. Again, too many factors in my life are going on for me to give you a definite answer. Yes, it's helping me.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say, yeah.
Just being in that community, going to clinic like every week and seeing the psychiatrist and stuff, it's been nice to just like have a little community of little ketamine people, and we talk to each other. So that's been nice.
And are there like restrictions, because ketamine is a drug? So are there like, do they do thorough evaluations on like, drug abuse history? Like, Because I would imagine that can be tricky.
Yeah. So I forgot to mention, of course, I had to do an evaluation. They hadn't even, diagnosed me because technically, I mean, there's a lot of diagnoses that I have that are not diagnosed officially. So they had to do that to make sure and then send that evaluation to my insurance and be like, hey, she has major depressive disorder. As if you're a recovering drug addict, you can still do ketamine, but you have to be much more monitored than me who doesn't have a history of drug abuse. But definitely, they're not just throwing it around and saying, oh yeah, everybody can do ketamine. Even if you have major depressive disorder, they need to clear you to make sure that you won't relapse or that you're being monitored on different levels to know that you're okay throughout the process and not going to relapse into a drug addiction.
Now, do you know, okay, so EMDR helps kind of relax your nervous system. And similarly, do you know how ketamine is supposed to work on the body?
Yes. So I was always thinking ketamine was a psychedelic, but it's not. It slows down the brain. And that's what it does. It just slows everything down. You're like in a drunken state while you're in the room. And I think that feeling of, I have time to really think and just exist in the world and relax and think about things in a different way instead of, with trauma, our anxiety is so high sometimes we can't even think straight. We're just ruminating intrusive thoughts all the time. And yeah, that's how it works. It slows down the body. And I should mention that if you're on antidepressants, they want you to continue to stay on those throughout the process. They don't want you to get off of it. And personally, I'm not on an antidepressant right now, but I still qualified because I had tried 2 different medications and it didn't help me. So if you have tried 2 different anxiety medications or depression meds and it didn't work, you can qualify. So that's why I qualified. But they want you to stay on your antidepressants. And another thing about Spravato is that they say, we don't exactly know what it does. We just know it helps. And so welcome to Big Pharma, guys. They don't exactly know what happens, but they say,
it helps.
It helps. So I'm not complaining, but yeah, you have to be on or continue to remain on your antidepressants throughout the process. They don't want you to cold quit in the middle of ketamine.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine there's also still so much research to be done about it because I do think it is newer.
Yeah. Spravato was approved, I believe, in 2019. So it's very new compared to other drugs.
Yep. Very new. And a lot of studies have been on halt because of the pandemic. So we're still learning. Now, I do have one final question for you, if you don't mind. And this is partially a question that I have personally, but also a question I think a lot of other people will have. So in going to different forms of therapy, right? It sounds like you have had good experiences. But I know that there are so many people out there who have tried alternative forms of therapy and have had bad experiences and, places that are poorly run, places that do more harm than good. I know that has certainly been the experience for myself and many others. What is some advice that you can give people who I think are just sort of feeling down and out about the quality of mental health care that they've experienced?
You have to go in with an open mind because these places are run by humans. I mean, like I said, at the first trauma center I went to, it was almost like a jail. And I left, thank God, at 4:00 every day. I did not have to sleep there. And there is some stuff that would go down at night. For sure. There's everybody in there has trauma and things happen. So I think for me, None of the places I've been to, none of my therapists have been perfect. Perfection actually doesn't even exist in the world. So I'm just going to say that. But I mean, of course, if there's abuse going on, if there's emotional abuse or physical abuse from the staff and stuff, I'm not saying, oh, go in with an open mind. Just ignore it.
Right.
But I just know that if you go in thinking that everything's going to be exactly right, everything's going to run smoothly at whatever care center you're at or whatever treatment you do, the reality is that it won't, and you'll probably be disappointed. I mean, there are definitely flaws at places that I've been to. The place I was just at, called Nova Grace, I have had tremendous healing from them, but there's things that could be worked on. Absolutely could be worked on to make it an even better program. But there are some things I just had to let go because I knew that doing therapy at a Nova Grace twice a week and getting EMDR, and I was in Texas, so I was away from my mom. I was away from my childhood home. I was so grateful to be there and to be able to have that help, that there are some things, if it wasn't overly concerning, that I just had to let go in the moment. Yeah. And I would complain. I would speak up if there's something that made me uncomfortable. And there were things that did change, and sometimes it didn't. But I also think another thing is people might be disappointed in alternative treatments because you put in most of the work, if not all of it. Therapists are there to guide you. And I think that's something I was naive in believing when I was younger, even probably like 2 years ago, not even that long, where I thought, oh, well, why isn't this therapist fixing me? Why isn't she doing this? Why XYZ and all this stuff? And it's like, therapy only works if you're as honest as you are. If you hold things from your therapist, you're not going to make any progress. If you keep rejecting the way that you behave and act and how resistant you are to treatment, you're not going to get better. You can't blame the treatment center. You can't blame your therapist. Of course, again, some therapists suck. I just had a really awful one from September to December. She told me, I said, gosh, I feel like I can't go in public and I feel like I can't do things by myself. And I'm so upset. I don't know what's wrong with me. And she said, just do it.
Oh, wow. That's great advice. Thank you. I never thought of that before.
So again, I just want to restate, there are people that are super problematic and there's abuse in some of these places. There are, and I'm not saying to go in and be like, oh yeah, ignore it and dissociate from it, which is probably how you've coped this long. Don't do that. But it is run by humans and it is how much you contribute. Because like I told you before we started recording, one of my therapists, I said, I'm really open. And she called me out and she said, no, you're not. You're not open. And I'm like, I got so guarded and I'm like, whatever. And then I thought about it and I said, she's right. And that's how we proceeded forward. I was able to really work with that therapist and get through so many deep things because I was just completely honest with her and I let myself cry. So that's my advice. Be open-minded. Just know the process isn't perfect. If there are major concerns, voice them. If things don't change, then maybe you need to try a different area, like a different place, a different therapist. And you have to contribute your full honesty and vulnerability to it, or else you will not heal. That's something that I wish I had known when I was 19, when I started the journey.
That is incredible advice. All of it. I agree. I mean, you said it perfectly. And I want to thank you for coming on the show because this is something that's really important to talk about. It's something you spoke a lot of hard truths that people, I think, really need to hear. Hey, including myself, right? Like we all need to hear a lot of this stuff. And it's also very inspiring. And I think it certainly has given me a lot of hope for the future and for my own recovery. And, it's hope that we wouldn't have without your willingness to be vulnerable and come on here and talk about it. So thank you so, so much. I know that I mentioned Sarah's Instagram in the beginning of this episode, which the name is, can you give the name one more time?
vulnerable and not afraid.
Vulnerable and not afraid. You know that will be in the show notes for today's episode. And I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show today.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
It was so great talking to you, and
for more information,
happy to answer any of the listeners' questions if they directly message you, or you can directly message me on my Instagram. I'm happy to do a call or send a voice memo, share these sources. I mean, the whole reason I started the Instagram, partly for myself, to remind myself, hey, this is where I've been, and to support our show. We are asking for $5 a month, which is the equivalent to a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So please head on over again. That's patreon.com/late after trauma.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you,
Sarah.
and we appreciate your support.
Yeah, no problem.